My name is Aeberhard. I'm an architect. I graduated from the ETH in Zurich and I have a Master's of Science in Urban Design from Columbia University. I work for the city of Basel as Kantonsbaumeister or city architect. So I'm responsible for the development of the city as a whole. Well, I think Swiss culture can be summarized in a few words. It's the country is diverse. I mean, there are 4 languages, there are rural areas, there are global cities, there are long traditions, there's a thriving economy, we have immigration for over a century now. That's quite with great impact, I think, on society and the economy. There's a strong federalistic structure of the government, a high autonomy of the municipalities, for instance, or the states, the cantons. We are very precise, but we also have a tendency to regulate everything, maybe even to over-regulate things. We tend to be very thorough with our things. And of course, there are advantages, benefits to that, but there's also, I think, a tendency to the aseptic, maybe sterile, germ-free in the end, because we have to regulate everything. But there are also new tendencies, for instance, that one can see. For instance, what I find really interesting is some sort of Mediterraneization that's going on, especially concerning public space. People tend to use public space much more nowadays than they used to a few years ago. So of course there's this legislation who takes care of how we behave or how we move in public space, how do we design it. But on the other side, when we're talking about this Mediterraneization of space, I think it's a great opportunity, but there are also consequences which lead to conflicts. Sometimes I ask myself, do we actually know how to behave in this space? Because we can talk about littering, which has become a big issue. But on the other hand, I think it's obvious that the more heterogeneous our society becomes, the more important it is for our city to provide open spaces where one can experience ourselves and being part of a community and to interact with each other. So, of course, this regulation or this tendency to over-regulate and this, on the other side, this kind of chaos that's in a certain way also establishing itself, it's a topic that we have to seriously discuss about. And I think, especially here in the administration, we talk about it quite frequently. For instance, when it comes to allowing new bars setting up along the river, do they have to require or meet some certain standards when it comes to aesthetics, for instance, or do we just leave it as it is? And obviously there are both sides that seem to be important or could be important to discuss. Well, I think Basel is a very interesting mixture of a provincial town and an emerging global city. I think that you can feel those two worlds while wandering through the city, and I personally find that very inspiring because you have the provincial part, and on the other side you also have the global scale. And of course, those two worlds, they benefit from each other, but of course there are also some conflicts. They're colliding, they're provoking conflicts. What I find very interesting also is it's a rough city also in a way, because of its past, of its history, the industrial production that has been going on here forever. So there's a very strong connection of the population with their chemische, as they call it, as their chemical industry. There's this tie to the industry, to its roots, and in this sense, it's also a city that architecture-wise is quite heterogeneous. For instance, it's probably one of the most heterogeneous cities in Switzerland. There's some sort of also brutality in terms of scale, for instance, but also in terms of how one architectural setting is set right next to another one. And I think that is very interesting. So we have, as a result, a quite interesting or intriguing or remarkable heterogeneity. Well, when it comes to architecture, I also think there's quite a heterogeneous image that you can find in this city. Of course, there are the global stars of Herzog de Meuron and Diener. Then there's a very broad layer of very talented and renowned architecture firms, and also many young talents. I think we are an attractor also for young talents still to come here. But in the everyday production in this city, we also see as everywhere the production of naive, ingenuous architecture that's actually not even interesting. It's actually a problem because it's just driven by economic forces as a sole perpetuator of creating it. When it comes to architecture and the realm in the public space, there is not such a big effort in the public space as maybe in other Swiss cities. It's interesting, especially in a country where there's a special precision and there's also a care to do things. And sometimes, there are these spaces, these public spaces in Basel where I think, wow, how could this happen and why is it the way it is? For instance, I'm thinking about the Heuwaage in a certain way, also about the Barfüßerplatz, even central squares, or like the Marktplatz, which I think is in the end, it's a disaster. So it's hard to say why the public space maybe doesn't have that much attention as the individual building. Now, to me, it's very clear that Basel's most important public space is the area along the Rhine. And also the fact that, everybody can go there in most places. And we're working on, as you see with the Elsässer Rheinweg towards France to make it even more public. So I think that's a very important achievement. And it's a wonderful space, with great openness, and I think it's very important for Basel. What I would consider as a really interesting achievement is the new planning of the Elisabethenanlage, which has been done quite a few years back. But I think it really made or transformed a really difficult area between, two very important public attractors, the station on one side and the inner city on the other side, to a wonderful place where people just could gather and spend time. As the city is becoming more dense, there's obviously a growing rivalry concerning the public space. Public space has to be almost everything. And so I think it has to be also thought in new ways. And we have this very strong debate of people who think it's a tragedy if we lose one parking spot, while on the other side people are fighting for more space on public space. But now we also start to experiencing also the downside of it, that people say, no, I want this parking spot to stay, because if you take it away, it will attract crowds of people making noise and partying all night long. So I rather have a car park in front of my house than a public space, which is totally insane. But it's a reality. It's a political reality we're facing. So I think we really need to be thinking public space in new ways. we probably need multi-use of certain areas, residual leftover spaces that are, along the Osttangente or. So what I'm saying, especially along infrastructures, I think there are those spaces that we have to find. And also, I think it becomes more and more apparent and also absurd that we provide so large zones of free space to traffic, flowing traffic, but also parking. I think there are, even main public squares which have been important throughout history in Basel could need an uplift. So obviously Barfüßerplatz is one of these spaces, which of course would be totally different than, for instance, the Elisabethenanlage that we talked before, with a certain representation, with a character that would be highly urban, that would be really a meeting place for the whole of society. On the other side, big, also an important square would be Klaraplatz, which, it's just a huge, how do I say that? It's just it's a tram chaos, public transport all over. You don't really know where to go. It's kind of difficult to orientate. And at the same time, I think, there'd be great potential there to make a center, an urban center for Klein Basel. And of course, there are also smaller public spaces in the outskirts or in some neighborhoods that we've been taken care of, or that have been taken care of the last few years. For instance, Pinkenanlage, I think it would just become very, very interesting. Liesberger Matte in Gundeli Quartier, but they have, obviously, they're a totally different aim, because they need to be a playground in the first place for children. So that's also the interesting part, to have all these different kind of spaces and to be very precise about how they're done, what their main aim is, which needs they need to fulfill, etc. Talking about Barfüßerplatz, there's just a big potential, and you just have to take care of it, because right now it just looks like a place is like a dump, But it will transform itself. Now it's going to be so clear with the extension of the Stadtcasino, because it will become a totally different space, and people will move differently on this space. So obviously, I think it's just a matter of time, and there will be also enough forces and people, who would realize that and also encourage a new setting of the space. Because right now it's difficult, you can't say, we never would get the money to do it right now, because people don't really see the need, and they say, well, everything's fine, so I'll just leave it. With the new extension, it will transform the whole setting of the building. In one way, there will be permeability, but you can come from the theater right through on Barfüßerplatz, and on the other side, the actual address will be on Barfüßerplatz. So the square will have a totally different connotation. And with the Barfüßer Kirche, the Historische Museum, also on the same side, and this interesting topography, which at the moment is quite difficult, or maybe not even solved abundantly or as it should be, I think there's really great potential to give this square, this space, a totally new setting. Well, I think the situation in Basel is similar to many other places, at least in Switzerland or also in Western Europe. Basel has become a post-industrial city, production site, and also some sort of a global city with all its benefits and disadvantages. And of course, the advantages are evident, and the steady economic growth, for instance, and creation of new jobs. And still, an important influx of human capital, which we all take advantage of. They also generate, of course, these advantages also generate pronounced problems. So if you're asking me, the gentrification can't never be totally avoided. But we need to lessen its impacts. And there are means that needs to be taken into consideration. So I think it's very important that we take this very seriously and that we address the issue and also take action. And the situation in Basel is not so bad, I would say, because we enabled the production of more housing very actively. The public hand, on the other side, has become quite active in supporting co-op housing, but also in terms that it actively buys land, properties, develop new housing by the state. So, we address the issue. And I think the most crucial aspect to my understanding is that we, in the end, stay a city for everybody, for the many, instead of just for the richer or privileged few. Well, starting with Erlenmodt. Erlenmodt is a case that's been on the agenda for a very long time. So it's been developing steadily, slowly but steadily, and we're starting to see the results. And of course, you also have to understand that it's a planning from the 90s or right after the millennium. So maybe today we would do some things differently, but nevertheless, now you can see results. And as I said again or before, as the development is going quite slowly, you can also react while the process is going on. So if you look at Erlenmodt Ost, you'll see it's a different approach than Erlenmodt West. And of course it will take some more time until we see the whole development. But it's a development from scratch, so it's a totally different setting, for instance, compared to Klebeck Plus, because Klebeck Plus is a vast industrial area within the city that is now totally blocked off. Today, people you can't enter because it used to be, or it is, a production site. It's a private manufacturing property. And now industries are leaving or closing down or going other places or simply don't need as much space anymore as they used to. So it's becoming a huge opportunity for us to actually build a new magnet within existing neighborhoods and connecting those neighborhoods with new public spaces. Obviously, there will be new approaches, accesses to the Rhine River, to the west, to the Wiese River, to the east. And the setting is different also in terms of buildings, because there's an important industrial heritage which we take into consideration and which can be redeveloped. So there will be a unique flair or atmosphere in this area, which I think is a huge surplus and is very, very interesting for this development.